Gotham Knights has finally been released, and oh boy, lots of people are pretty mixed on this game, and as a big Batman fan myself, seeing as he's probably my favorite character right behind Spider-Man, I can totally see why. I don't think it's a bad game, but I do think that for something being released post Arkham Knight, Spider-Man, Guardians, etc., and pricing itself at not just $60, but the quote-unquote next-gen price of $70, the end product is a bit disappointing. Right out of the gate, the entire concept behind this new interpretation is that both Batman and Commissioner Gordon are dead. Kaput. Fucking click-clacked. Leaving Nightwing, Batgirl, Red Hood, Robin, and Alfred to pick up the pieces of Gotham. Which is legitimately interesting. Those characters never got enough attention in previous games. And even if they did, they weren't that great. I'm looking at you, not Red Hood. Speaking of which, this is sort of a spiritual successor to Arkham Knight's ending, while not actually taking place in the Arkham universe like the upcoming Suicide Squad game does. It's nice to see a story about a world without Batman, without also having to be tied down by 4 games worth of lore. And thankfully, Gotham Knights does a great job of exploring that concept. Barbara, Tim, Jason, Dick, and Alfred all feel like a real family, and often have very good chemistry. Each of the 4 playable characters also have their own respective side stories, allowing for more background and character development. As much as I'm disappointed by what this game ended up being, I give WB Montreal major props for doing a great job of exploring some underrepresented sides of Batman. A lot of that credit also goes to the voice cast. The standout role to me was Stephen O. Young, Mr. Negative himself, who did a fantastic job as Jason Todd. Also, Carrie Walgren does a great Harley. I love that she adds moments where the high-pitched voice goes away, adding more Harleen than I expected. I'd also like to add that she voiced Gwen Stacy in the first Amazing Spider-Man game. That's not important whatsoever. I'm not even teasing a future video. I just really wanted to mention that I found out that fun tidbit during research. In Gotham Knights, you can switch out which character you want to play as in between your nightly patrols. And without spoiling it, the game does a lot of little things to make each different character feel like the protagonist, something that many other ensemble games really struggle with. There's some major stuff, like dialogue changing to fit each of the Bat Kids. I gotta find a different term for them, that's really fucking weird. That dynamic dialogue allows for some really interesting character interactions, like Red Hood talking to Harley Quinn. And damn, as someone who watched Under the Red Hood a million times as a kid, that was just fucking awesome, man. Even the ending, which I can't really show much of for obvious reasons, plays into each of the 4's arcs that were covered in their respective side stories. As you can tell, I have to keep it all very, very vague, but there's just so much work put into making each character feel significant. Like the rest of the game, I have problems with the story that I will get into later, but the team did an amazing job of writing these main characters and making them feel not just significant, but characters who you want to see succeed. Gameplay-wise, Gotham Knights is an action RPG, and because of this, there's been a lot of comparison to Marvel's Avengers. And while there are some similarities, like the looting mechanics or emphasis on co-op, the big difference that I commend Gotham Knights for is that it's entirely focused on the single-player experience, with no compromises to the campaign whatsoever. While Avengers would often use multiplayer missions with no integral story content or mission variety whatsoever, and just copy and paste the maps to pad out the campaign. Here, the online co-op doesn't clash or interfere with the single-player experience at all. Missions feel very thought out and well scripted, and bosses never feel too overpowered or bullet spongy, save for Mr. Freeze. On that note, if you expected the combat to be exactly what you remember from the Arkham series, you're in for a rude fucking awakening. It is extremely different from the Arkham series. There's less focus on gadgets or combo lengths, and more on enemy weaknesses and timing your attacks. Between the momentum attacks and various abilities you can only unlock from completing challenges, the combat definitely has a bit of a learning curve. But once you get used to it, it feels fine and can even be satisfying at times. Red Hood was my favorite only because I like the fact that I could shoot people. There's an open world Gotham you can explore at night, and it's kinda disappointing. I really like the emphasis on purple in this game. It makes it stand out, but that's kind of it. Gotham City this time around isn't as detailed or iconic as it's been portrayed in previous incarnations, which is a major bummer. But the devs did improve on an issue that the Arkham series had. For 4 fucking games straight, they always found an excuse post-Asylum to have a city filled with criminals. By Origins, it was old, and by Night, I just fucking clocked out at that point. Here, Gotham is much like any other open world. There's civilians walking around, police standing around or harassing civilians, criminals hanging out in alleys and hideouts. There's even homeless people. The Bat Cycle is a really great addition that was a lot of fun to control. I never thought that I'd say a vehicle in a Batman game would be good after Arkham Knight, but it controls really well, and you can even wheelie over people's cars, which is so much fucking fun. The races were probably my favorite side activity in the 15-ish hours I spent playing. The rest of the side activities like collecting batarangs or opening caches definitely felt like mindless padding that each and every open world game already has. Hey, at least they're not annoying or egregious like the fucking Riddler trophies. I still, to this day, cannot believe that you masochists actually did 4 games worth of that shit. Since Gordon is, dead, the GCPD doesn't really fuck with Batman anymore, which understandably extends to the Bat family as well. And WB Montreal does an amazing job of conveying that plot point in game by having the police arrive on scene after a mission, which forces the player to flee like a real vigilante. It's yet another great way that the game weaves together the story and gameplay into one cohesive vision. It's also one of my favorite implementations of a hostile police force in a superhero game. Yeah, the city can often feel barren, much more so than Cyberpunk, but between the Bat Cycle grapple hook and each character's different traversal techniques that they unlock, it was still fun to ride around the city and stop crimes. During the daytime, your playable character roams around the Belfry, which is essentially the new Batcave. It's pretty much just a hub to upgrade suits, change the Bat Cycle colors, and progress in case files. But the daytime stuff is a part of Batman that's often been ignored, so it's a welcome addition. I like the variety of available costumes, as well as the customizable parts, which allowed for lots of different looks. I do wish that you could mix and match between the different costume sets, and for a Batman game, I expected there to be a lot more comic book suits outside of the fucking pre-order bonus, but I'm still glad with what we got. So with that, I feel like I've established that I like a lot of stuff in this game, but obviously, there's some stuff I'm not too fond of, if that's how we're gonna say it. First off, Gotham City is incredibly barren. I'm also not a big fan that everybody's traversal is locked behind knighthood, such as Batgirl's glide capabilities. Not to mention that the other's traversal feels weird. The teleportation and the fucking whatever the fuck Nightwing and Red Hood have, I don't like it. Just make them all glide, it's fucking weird. Stealth just does not feel good whatsoever. The buttons felt very unresponsive. Just trying to drop down from a ledge should not take as much work as it does in this game. Not to mention that the animations on the stealth takedowns themselves take fucking forever. And the perch takedowns are an upgrade. Why? It just felt like all the stealth was a bit of an afterthought, which wouldn't be a huge problem to me personally if it wasn't required for so many missions. So despite all of my issues, to say the least, I really did have fun for the opening 6 to 7 hours of the game. However, Gotham Knights eventually became very stale and I just wanted it to end. And I kind of blame that on the story. Gotham Knights' campaign is centered around trying to solve Bruce's final case, where he's investigating the Court of Owls, a secret society that's controlled Gotham from the shadows for centuries. And because of that, the opening consists of lots of leads that end up being dead ends. However, they eventually turn into their own side stories, which is fine. It got a little repetitive, but it was kind of clever. However, it keeps fucking doing this for the entire 15 hours. Every couple fucking missions, the main story would take a backseat to set up a new side story or just to pad itself out. Cause, oh my fuck! The game often pads itself in places where it didn't need to, like the random man-bat hunt near the very end of the game, which comes out of left field and is very weird. I liked both the side stories as well as what WB Montreal attempted to do with this story, but it just wasn't given enough focus. They were too worried about making it bigger to reconsider if the main storyline was strong enough to stand on its own. And the biggest disappointment, hands down, is the antagonists, specifically the Court of Owls. The very reason everybody wanted to play this game. This is the first Batman game in a very long time that doesn't focus on the Joker at all. As far as I know, there isn't even an Easter egg that he's still alive in this universe. Instead, the Court of Owls are the major focus. And as someone who's never read about them in the comics, I was extremely interested in seeing them take center stage in this game. The problem with the Court is that they're more so treated as a set piece or a means to an end for the actual villain, who's very, very obvious, but I won't spoil it, just in case you do want to play this, you fucking psychopath. I wouldn't say that everything surrounding them was outright boring. There was a lot of unique, horror-adjacent stuff. There's specifically a mission right before the third act that is absolutely amazing. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about if you've played it. But there was just too many missions where I was bored because the story surrounding them wasn't interesting whatsoever. I was actually more intrigued in the side cases with Harley Quinn peddling placebo pills or Mr. Freeze controlling the weather. Again, I'm not going to spoil it, but the entire ending is made all the more underwhelming because the devs were trying to make it seem like a secret or a double cross, when it was very obvious what the main villain was going to do. I just wish that they'd showed their cards earlier on and let us fight the main antagonist throughout the game, focusing more on making a strong story instead of trying to have a gotcha moment. As is, the court is disappointing and was kinda dumb. The main antagonist is obvious and underdeveloped. By the end of this 15+ hour story, I felt like half of it could have been cut out. But now this is where we get to the worst part of Gotham Knights. It's excessive technical issues. I initially bought this game on PC because I'm a moron, and my experience was pretty damn bad. I honestly blamed most of my hitching and freezing issues on the game being installed on a hard drive instead of an SSD. I understand that games nowadays are made with SSDs in mind. I even had a few hitches in games like Ghostwire Tokyo or Spider-Man Remastered, so I figured that it was just a side effect like in those games. But this was ridiculous. It's unplayable. Then I began to blame it on my rig. Maybe I just can't run this game. However, since production on this video began, Digital Foundry has released their video on the PC port, citing many of the same issues I had on their higher-end hardware. What the fuck? I was hell-bent on making this video, so I ended up buying it on the Series S as well, before realizing that it was only 1080p, 30 frames per second, for $70. Personally, I wasn't too bothered by that being the case on Series S, but it was a shock to hear that it was the same for PS5 and Series X. Now, I'm not a game developer, and can't possibly grasp the difficulties that go into crossplay, but putting the blame on the Series S seems wrong. Because damn, even on the S, after buying the game for a full $70, the game would crash on top of having pop-in and occasional frame rate drops. While it wasn't as bad as it was on PC, you shouldn't be seeing this performance on next-gen consoles, especially for a title that's priced $10 higher than most AAA games. I think it's pretty obvious that this game just wasn't well optimized across the board. I want to reiterate, I am not a game developer, and I'm not trying to say that WB Montreal is incompetent. That'd be pretty fucking smug of me to come up here on a soapbox and say that I'm smarter than all the hundreds of people who worked on this game. To tell the truth, I'd be less bothered by the performance issues on console if I loved the game underneath all of them. I played Cyberpunk and Guardians on a base PS4 at launch, Saints Row Reboot on a base Xbox One, and Fallout 4 and Watch Dogs on PC. Point being that even though I shouldn't have to, I will suffer through performance issues for a game that I really love. Fucking gnarly. But here, all the frame rate issues and crashes just detracted from the experience. I'm not a big fan of using comparison as a way to determine if a game is good or not. However, it's hard to look at Gotham Knights' contemporaries as well as its predecessors and not see how flawed this game is. It feels like WB Montreal wanted so bad to leave the shadow of the Arkham series behind, which is admirable, but their own interpretation is a lot more buggy, bland, and feels like it was focused on quantity rather than quality. As a new Batman game made in the midst of a superhero game renaissance, there was a lot put on Gotham Knights' shoulders. And I'd be lying if I said that this game was terrible. There's lots of mechanics and story moments that I absolutely adored. However, as a whole, it didn't really live up to anybody's expectations. Hopefully, after realizing where they might have fell short, WB Montreal will give it another shot a few years down the road and make something to really knock our socks off. I hope you all enjoyed that review. I actually wrote this and recorded the first 2 pages before Bayonetta 3 even released, but life got in the way. Then that game took over what little free time I had. Then after the Bayonetta video, I came down with a really bad respiratory infection that put me out of commission and is still fucking with me as I record this. But I'm glad that it's all finally done and over with. It was a disappointing game, but I still had some fun. Anyways, don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that jazz. I'll catch you guys next time. Later, kids. Have a good night.
Hello. Gotham Corner Store? Yes, we seem to be down to our last Diet Coke. A gentleman is on his way to pick some up. Just look for a black car. No, this black car will be rather difficult to miss.